Good morning and hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us today at Living Waters, falling deeper in love with God's Word. I am one of your hosts, Stephanie Pavlantos.
Good morning. I'm Lauren Cruz, your other host. Good
Yes,
morning.
it's good to be here today.
It is.
We're
And
getting
we
closer to summer.
we're talking just a few minutes ago and kind of planning out what we want to do next because we are getting down to the end of our
Last day
study.
for Lauren's book, Strength of a Woman,
Mhm.
last recording for that. So
the last two chapters.
it's been good. It's been really good.
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of interesting parts, of course, with even the alphabet, the shapes, the letters, the meanings, the numbers, the numerical value. But I love the stories of the women too.
I do too. Yeah, and they're real. Stephanie had asked me, like, how'd you meet Linda? Because we have one last story today. I didn't include a story for Tav. And for Shin, I have a story of Linda and her husband. And, it's really neat how God put me in touch with all of these ladies. Some of them have been lifelong friends. Some of them I was introduced along the way. And then this one, I was introduced to Stephanie, which was the letter I-N. It's funny, I know them by the letters. And then Stephanie introduced me to Linda, and we've become friends. She works in my community. She does run a shop, and it's actually right across the street from the high school that I work in. And these are real people. These are real struggles. And I couldn't even cover everything what we as women face. I was kind of reading through the chapter, and kind of there's a list of things and struggles that we handle, and it doesn't even scratch the tip of the iceberg of, I didn't even put illness and cancer and disease and everything else that we handle. I think it would take a whole nother book to go through all that.
I think the stories were good when, because they, like, I know when Mike and I got married, and whenever we would have trouble or any kind of disagreement, argument, I felt like we were the only people in the world that argued like that. Like, other married couples who were Christians, they didn't argue. They didn't fuss. They didn't have these kind of difficulties with each other. And especially when the one couple that we hung around really didn't. I mean, they just always seemed to get along. And my husband said that's just an act. They don't. No one always gets along. No one always just has no issues in their marriage. So I guess it's encouraging in one regard that other people struggle, but God gets them through it in one way or another. Even if, even in times where there is divorce, even in times when there is death, God got all these women through these rough, difficult days and times in their marriage and in their life. So
I struggled when we were first married. I went to college and I worked, and I intended to work after I had my children. I'm like, it can be done. People do it all the time. And I couldn't relate to, my Sunday school teacher at the time. She was a much older woman who had always been a stay-at-home mom, and a lot of the women around me were stay-at-home moms. I'm like, that's not me. And, I just couldn't relate to them. I wanted to work. And then there was a season that I stayed home, and I was home for a good 12, 13 years with my kids. Thankfully, and, sacrificed a lot, learned a lot about, the sacrifices you make when you choose to be a stay-at-home mom. And, I had to change my whole perception of self-worth.
Right.
Because I remember pulling my little son in the wagon, just taking him for a walk and thinking, what have I become? Like I'm just walking around the neighborhood dragging this kid, and asking my husband, like, could I go buy something for myself because my money was gone, and just kind of losing myself in that aspect. But, I'm way over that now. I don't have a problem.
And I was like the only one in my family that stayed home. Like my sisters, they all worked.
Really?
And then on top of staying home, I homeschooled, and so I
Oh,
was just like
wow.
the very, very different sister of
Yeah.
us all, you
Yeah.
know? And so, and even my husband's family, it's like, "You're gonna
Uh-huh.
what? You're gonna homeschool? Why would you?"
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so it was just I feel like I've always just been different. I mean, more homeschoolers, but
Right.
even the church I attended, I was the only homeschool mom.
Interesting.
And
Interesting.
so, yeah, it was
Mhm.
really like I was just like totally different from all the other women I knew who worked,
Right.
who were full-time mom and full-time outside the home working, and I was just like, "Oh my goodness." So, yeah, so that was hard because since I mean, I came home really, I quit my job the day the babies were born, the
Mm.
twins,
Wow.
because
Yeah.
they were born prematurely. So that
Yeah.
was my last day of work.
Yeah.
So the day I gave birth, and that I've never really been back to work like full time since
Mhm.
then. So yeah, it's all different. We all are in
Yeah.
different places and different seasons of life. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
but I
Yeah,
think that was
I've
cool because
experienced
all
both.
your yeah.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah,
So
and I would even say too, I had 2 kids pretty close to each other. They were like 2 years apart, 2.5 years apart, and then there's like this almost 5 years, 4 5.5, 6-year span, and I had another one, and I was home for my first 2, and my other one only knows me as a working mom. So,
mhm,
very different, vastly different. So, yeah. So,
yeah,
multiple stories. I mean, we come in many shapes and sizes, and
right.
we come at motherhood and parenting from many different angles.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
today we're going to look at the letter Shin and the letter Tav, the last 2 letters from Proverbs 31. I will read the verses, and if it's okay, we'll jump in.
Okay.
All right.
Woo.
This is Proverbs 31:30 and Proverbs 31:31.
Mhm,
It says, "Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord, she is to be praised, or she shall be praised." Proverbs 31:31. "Give her the product of her hands, and let her works praise her in the city gates." And so we've got the last 2 and the last 2 letters, Shin and Tav. Shin actually has 2 forms. It's either Shin or Sin, either one. It just depends on where the dot is placed when you look at the letter and how it's used in the word. It's kind of the S sound or the SH sound.
mhm.
The letter looks the same. I don't know if you have that book, if you
Oh,
want to show them.
oh yeah, I'm sorry. I
That's
was
okay.
behind. I didn't get it.
Yours has a spiral bound and it folds
Yep.
back much better than mine does.
Yeah,
So,
I've got it. I keep it handy, but I
yeah.
forgot to get it open.
If you look at it, it almost looks like a W. So
Mhm,
it's got 2 images really. The primary image is teeth, and actually the 2 front teeth. So you kind of got the little 2 front teeth there, but also fire. It also very much represents fire. Um,
and they do here, they put it with E's because the I
yeah,
sound in Hebrew is an E,
yeah,
so it can be sheen,
sheen or
shin,
shin,
um
yeah. It's a letter that often represents God. So if you've ever seen a Jewish man where they wear
mhm,
the tefillin on their head and they wrap it around their arms, on that little box is the letter Shin or Sheen,
mhm,
and it represents the name of God for El Shaddai. And so,
mhm,
if you look at a fire or teeth, the imagery behind it is destruction. And we think of that sometimes as a bad thing, but also fire is refinement. And
mhm,
so the letter often is used in contrasting words. So it's used in the word crush, crush. It's also used in the word peace. It's
mhm,
used in the word
mhm.
sin, but it's also used in the word repent. And so,
Yeah, here's some this was on the other page. Can you see that? Because it even has up here, prince and warrior,
yeah,
repeat, repent, return,
right.
humble, low, um, falsehood, lying, and then peace and shalom. So
Right.
you actually named some of those.
Yeah. So you've got a definite letter of contrast, and think about, you've got that imagery and that figurative imagery of fire. Well, we look at God, and God is often represented as fire in the Bible, and fire can either be destruction and destroying something, but fire is often like a refiner's fire.
Purifying.
If you're purifying metals, like gold and silver, you put it over a fire, and what that fire does is it basically boils the metal and brings out the impurities. And so, you've got transferring fire, and you've got it representing God as well, and passion too. The fire of the heart and the passion,
Oh, yeah.
the love of God. So you can see how it could really be a letter of contrast. So it's a great letter, and I think thinking through Linda's story, and we'll talk a little bit about Linda's story, you can see how it definitely relates to repentance and refinement and destruction, and definitely a contrast in life between what the world would expect us to do and how she handled a really, really difficult situation.
And if I can add, just El Shaddai, going back a little
Yeah.
bit to what you said about El Shaddai. El Shaddai was the name that God gave Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that's how they knew him. But when Moses came onto the scene, he said, my name to them was El Shaddai, but my name, you will know me as Yod He Vav He,
I
or
am.
Jehovah, we might say,
Mm-hmm.
because it was based on a need. In a
Mm-hmm.
sense, the El Shaddai was, I will provide everything. I will be your provider. I will be like your mother in a sense, because
Right.
actually that's more of a of a meaning of that word. It's almost like to nurse your baby at your breast. It's that kind of a mother thing. And then, but Yod He Vav He is more of a word of, I'm your everything. I'm going to be everything you need, everything you want, and everything you are. And
That's
so it's a
great.
little different. And I found that interesting when I read that in Genesis.
That's
So,
great. That's great. The verse starts with the word secure, which is deceit. And some people think, some of the commentaries I was reading think that these last two verses were probably written by the scribe. Like if a scribe was like listening to what the mother was saying, then maybe they took over and finished it off. Because if it was written by a husband, because if we looked back, the last 2-3 verses were like how the husband and the family are proclaiming these compliments to the wife. Well, if they were then to say, look, your beauty and everything good about you is just a breath, and it's going to fade away,
right.
it's not necessarily a compliment.
Yeah.
So,
Not what you want to hear from your husband.
right. And then also, maybe it's going back to the words of the mom, because the mother's like, hey, remember that her beauty is going to fade, and, don't be wrapped up in her charm, because that's a breath.
Right.
So, and it's a really good contrast again to, don't worry about the physical. It's not the physical that we should be so attracted to, but it's the fear of the Lord. Is she a woman who fears the Lord? So that, that word secure is deceitfulness. And it's interesting. The word picture is deceit at the back of the head. So it's lies. And so, when you lie about somebody, you don't do it usually to their face. It's done behind their back. And so, that deceit is, how people are handling things, at the back of their heads. So I thought that was very interesting. And then the word fear is Yahweh. And it's that fear and reverence of the Lord. And a good way to remember it is it's just being so intimate with God that it's not that you're afraid of him or anything like that, but you you're so intimate with him, you respect him so much, you don't want to break his heart.
Yeah.
You
And
just
sorry.
go ahead. I was going to let you finish your thought.
Oh, well, when I was writing a blog post, and I was writing on fearing the Lord. And the cool thing of what you've been explaining throughout this whole book is there's always a feeling when you get that picture, there's a feeling behind that picture. And the Hebrew has words in it that basically describe a feeling. And
Right.
when I discovered fear and having the fear of the Lord,
Mm-hmm.
they literally means the flowing of the gut.
Oh,
And so think
interesting.
of how when you get anxious about something or even fearful,
Mm-hmm.
not TMI, not to be TMI, but we spend a lot of time, you might spend a lot of time in the bathroom because you're kind of like worrying about something, but
Yeah.
but it's more like when the last time I entered something into into
A writing
a
contest.
writing contest, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I was very nervous. It wasn't a fearful thing, like, I wasn't fearing, I was just nervous about the outcome, but my stomach was in knots, my stomach
Oh.
was just all worked up, and for the whole day, like, leading up to that contest in the evening, and I remember telling my roommate, this is why they use this word for fear, because this is exactly what's going on that they were trying to put into a word, this
Oh,
rolling of the gut. And it can also mean even the rolling of a river, like something that's flowing and
that's
rolling. And so I thought it was interesting because think of who God is and the power he has over all of creation,
mm-hmm.
over all people, all things.
Mm-hmm.
He can, it even tells us, don't fear the one who can break your bones, but fear the one who can send your soul to heaven, right? So,
Right.
that kind of, we should get kind of like worked up in the sense that when we go, not all the time, but that kind of fear, that kind of flowing in our bodies, and that little bit of anxiety or
Mm-hmm.
anxiousness
Mm-hmm.
is normal when we're approaching the God of the universe. So
Right, right.
it's
I
not a
think of the
fear that you should.
coronation that just happened. I mean, if you're going before a king or a president, or
Yeah,
even attending a really fancy event or something, you've got a little going on.
yeah,
You're a
yeah.
little nervous, and
I
you
even
should.
heard the story of a guy. He was very liberal, and they were doing. He was like the cameraman or something, and He worked for some interviewer, and he was like they were going and talking to George Bush, and President Bush, and it was the second one, the younger of the two, and he's like all emotional. He goes, "I didn't even vote for you, but here I am, all emotional and all nervous about meeting you." And he goes, "I didn't even vote for you, but but still, it's being in the presence of the
Right,
president of the United
right,
States
right,
put in him this emotional response."
right.
And I thought that was really a good explanation of how it feels, because he didn't even really like the guy. He never wanted him to be president, but yet
Right.
because of his position of power, it made him emotional. It made him anxious. So
It is.
that's just kind of how I
No,
view
I think
fear.
that's a great way, because a lot of people, I think they misuse and misunderstand that fear of God. And
Mhm.
yes, we understand. We know it's like a respect for him, but today's times, respect is on such
Oh, yeah.
a
There's no respect.
skewed, yeah, I mean, it's a skewed understanding of what respect is. and
Mhm.
and like, I'm gonna respect you only if you respect me. I get that a lot of when, with the kids in high school and stuff.
Oh,
And
yeah.
like, not always,
Yeah.
and that's not, yeah. So
Yeah.
I think the way you've described it is a very good way. I wanted to introduce a little bit of Linda's story
Sure.
because it's a tough one. Linda's story is, Christian background. She grew up in the church, and so did her husband, and very much believed them to have a relationship with Christ, and establish their marriage in
Mhm.
that way.
Mhm. Mhm.
And realized after a few years into her marriage that her husband had had an affair. And not only that, no shame in his game. Like, he was not remorseful and continued. And
Yeah.
she chose to stay with him. She definitely, when I was talking with her and kind of getting the story, everybody's like, leave him, you're crazy to stay with him, what are you
Oh, yeah.
doing? And she's like, look, I can't just walk away, I have to at least fight, like we married each other in the church, we made this commitment to each other, you don't just walk away until you have done the battle, right? And then so she did the battle. She actually told me she would anoint his side of the bed and pray over his pillow.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, she
Yeah, that was cool.
prisoners.
But I thought it was cool what you said. Her pastor, once the pastor understood she had no desire to leave her husband, he said, you want it to work, so now you fight.
Now you got to fight. And I thought it was interesting too, because even in that day and age, for her pastor, it's not, she never really said, he counseled me to leave him or anything, but it's not that he was even saying you must stay, because a lot of times, when you go to the church for counseling, we don't always get great counsel. And he was not an abusive husband, and he was not gambling their life away and on drugs or anything like that. He made some really bad decisions, and they were definitely going to suffer because of that. But she was firm in her resolve, and he's like, all right, well, it's going to be a battle and you're going to have to fight.
Right.
So she shared, even days like her husband would be dropped off at work from home, like the mistress would drop him off.
Isn't that amazing? I don't think I could do that. It's like, yeah. That's my husband's girlfriend.
yeah. And so she did come to a point where, like, I'm not going to take this anymore. And at some point, for our mental health and for our well-being, we have to understand that and she never said that, like, I'm leaving him or anything, or I'm divorcing him or anything, but she understood at some point enough was enough. And she had actually packed her bags, had planned to leave, and she was faking that she was asleep. And he came in and he just humbly apologized and just had ended things with the other woman, and forgive me, and I was wrong. And like, he had been dealing with God, and it actually shared with her. I didn't put a lot of this in the book, but like, for days leading up to this point, like, he was doing battle with God, and her prayers were definitely working. And so the prayers of a woman definitely availed much in that aspect.
Yeah.
So, her life and her understanding of marriage and her self-worth, she said, and I share this in the book, prior to this, she was loving and trusting and gregarious, and just, she had a great background that she drew from, and had great parents and everything. And then, this affair had affected her so much, she questioned everything. So it was a hard thing.
That's right. That would be hard. Very hard.
I don't know how she did it, and I don't know that I could do it. You just, you're in the thick of it, in the fray, and you think you would like to act a certain way, but oh my goodness, I don't know. I don't know. So years later, they kind of went through reconciliation. She did share with me, and again, I didn't put this in a lot, but they didn't go to any kind of counseling, and they, she didn't go to counseling, and he didn't go individually or together. And she said, that I probably regret, and I probably would really encourage people to do that, because they just really didn't talk about it. They just kind of set it over here on the shelf and just didn't take it out and talk about it or look at it. And so, it always left her with questions, and, just that insecurity of things. And so 37 years later, she got a message. They got a message through Facebook, and a young woman was reaching out to them. And initially it was because she had some medical questions. I think the woman had a child, and the child was having some medical issues and wanted to know, like, is this did I get this from you, basically? And they're like, yeah. But the affair had resulted in a daughter, and they never knew that they had a daughter, or that he had a daughter. The daughter was told that your dad abandoned you and wanted nothing to do with you, and that really wasn't the case. But you know, he never had the opportunity to be a father. And you know, Linda immediately, here we go again. You know, I thought I was over this and accepting of this, and how do I handle this? So she went through that transforming fire again.
Right.
And could have easily been a woman to destroy things. You know, she had the opportunity, like, we're shutting this down now. But instead, she really felt God sensing her to open her heart and to be the mother, and to, you know, show a compassion to this young lady that it would only take the strength of God to do. And she did.
Wow.
And they have a restored, complete relationship even today. You know, she is mom and grandma to this other daughter and to her children. So yeah, I don't, lots of questions I put in here. You know, could you do it? And how do you respond to these refining fires?
Do you know where that family is spiritually at all?
What she has shared yes, I think they are believers. I don't know if the whole family is. And probably, you know, as mine too. I don't want to say levels of believers, but maybe levels of maturity and acceptance and healing. Also, healing has a whole lot to do with it.
It does.
You know, so yeah, I think they are believers, because I think in her initial note, she had said, you know, I feel like God has asked me to, you know, kind of impressed upon me to reach out to you. So there's some indication of faith there.
Oh, she did say that. She did say, I feel that God laid on my.
Yeah. So I think it's important too to note that the word Hallel is used here again. You know, the woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. And if Shin is a letter of contrast, and I'm going to read this right from page 207. You know, if Shin is that letter, then either the letter fire and destruction, or could be the trigger, the memory trigger, or the idea that it is a letter of contrast is triggered, because another word for Hallel is almost making a fool of yourself, like boasting. And so either we're boasting and kind of acting crazy about this woman, or we have that fear and reverence of this woman. And so perhaps the reader is reminded to remember the contrast of being transformed, fire versus a fire of destruction, the Hallel praise versus the Hallel of foolish boasting. Maybe that's it. So, you know, God's in that business of restoration, and, you know, he is definitely fanning some flames of restoration through Linda's story. But also, you know, what does that restoration look like in our lives? You know, what needs to be burned away? There are, we've seen throughout this passage, you know, there's opportunities here for growth and for fruit to be tested, and for pruning. And, you know, that's the cycle of a strong woman. It goes through the cycle.
Yes. Very good.
All right. So we're going to move on to letter Tav, which is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet.
Got that one ready.
Yeah. There you go.
Is that close enough?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it has the symbol of, you can see next to it, the cross. It actually started out more as an X. And
like, I think like this down here.
Yeah. So the early image of so the cross came to represent crucifixion. And so the early image of Christ actually was not the cross, because it was such a negative image.
Right.
And, the early crucifixion cross was actually an X. They were hung on the X.
Right.
And so that X, was tilted a bit, and, we ended up using the cross. So that X, X marks the spot. It's a sign, it's a symbol. So Tav represents the cross, but it also represents a sign.
And for people who couldn't read and write.
Right. They would make
had
a mark. Right. That's where that idea came from. Like if you, not only X marks the spot on a treasure map or something like that, but you would make your mark, or you would make your sign or something, and you'd put an X. So it came to represent a signature. And I'm glad you said that, because, I put this in this last chapter. If you were to look at, Genesis 2 verses 3, this is like the last phrase of, God creating the earth and going through all 7 days of creation. And the last thing he says, it says, then God blessed the 7 days and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which he had created and made. And that's like the final statement of creation. And if you look at those last 3 words, if you were to look at those last 3 words in Hebrew, and Hebrew is read from right to left, those last 3 words end with some interesting letters. The last word the third word ends with Aleph, then Mem, and then Tav. Those are the last 3 words of that phrase. And that those 3 letters spell the word truth in Hebrew. It's Amet. And so, you hear verses like Psalms 119:60 that says, the sum of your words is truth. That's what that says. And so literally I'm looking at the final words of creation, and the sum of those words are truth. But also, this is interesting too. If you were to take all the letters of the Hebrew alphabet and just write them all out in all their forms, there's actually 27 letters. There's 22, but then if you include the suffix that have the 2 forms. And then the first letter would be Aleph. The one right in the middle would be Mem, and the very last letter is Tav. And again, you spell truth. It's the word truth. And so the sum, all of your words contain truth. But I think this is so cool, talking about the signature. X, I'm going to leave my mark, or I'm going to leave my signature. So the final word of the final day of creation, the final message of creation, is the letter Tav. And it's almost like God has breathed out creation and spoken word, the word made flesh. And then it's like he put his little signature, he made his mark, and he left his signature as a Tav, representing truth, and also representing his mark on the final.
And when you go to the book of Numbers, and it shows, like, Leviticus was in the center, and then you had you had 4 tribes represented. Of course, there were 3 tribes per 4 of the leaders. So each of the 12 tribes were divided, basically, better way to say it, divided up into 4 groups. So then you had the banners of those 4 groups. It's very interesting because, and Numbers 1 gives us the exact number of how many are in each group. And so the group of Judah was the biggest. So it had like the longest leg when they sat around the tabernacle.
Right.
It had like the longest and most people. So they didn't just wrap around haphazardly around the tabernacle. They actually stayed in their groups.
They were assigned,
so you had the group that was north and south were the longest and most people in those 2 groups. So that was the longest shape. But then the people who sat east and west were the same. So they made this way. So when Moses would have looked up, looking down on the encampment, he saw the Tav.
Very cool. That's very
Mhm.
good. I mean, I know we've been playing with, do we want to start doing the tabernacle? But even the layout of the tabernacle and where things are
Yes.
placed and everything have that mark. So
Right.
God has left his mark literally on,
Mhm.
on this. We skipped this in Shin, but if you were to look at the topography, if you look at a topography map of Jerusalem, it
Oh,
looks
right.
like a Shin. His
Yes.
heart,
Yes, his name
and
is
yeah,
written
and his
in it.
name El
Yes.
Shaddai is written across
Yeah.
Jerusalem, and
And
there's
you're right, because we actually did that on an early broadcast. We
Mhm.
had it's actually the way our heart, it has that letter in
The
our
chamber, yeah, the
Mhm.
chambers of our heart are represented. It looks like the letter Shin. So
Mhm.
yeah. I love, I actually love Tav. And, this is kind of a wrap up of final words for her. It's interesting. The word praise is in here again. And it's actually the third time that praise is mentioned for this woman. And so, the number 3 is the number of completion. And, I think that's important to recognize that, God is speaking this heroic hymn over her. He's recognizing, he recognizes our strength. He recognizes our sacrifice. He recognizes the worth and work of our hand and our service and all that we do, and the mark and the
Right.
legacy that we're going to leave on our family. And he praises us for it 3 times. So I don't think that's a
Right.
coincidence.
Right.
And also it says, her work is praised at the city gates. So again, let her works be praised at the city gates, and give her the product of her hand. So the city gates, again, the whole premise of this chiastic poem is that the husband would be revered and honored at the city gates. But now to have her recognized and praised at the city gates is kind of a big deal. Women, that's not where women were generally
Right.
praised. And also in some translations it said, maybe the door to her home. But think about it, whether I am praised at the door of my home, maybe I am a stay-at-home mom, that's the where the work of my hands is done.
Mhm.
That's high praise indeed. Or if I'm at the city gates, which is the activity and where my life takes place, and in the city and in the
Right.
active parts of my life, that's high praise indeed as well. So
Mm.
to have that happen is just not a normal compliment, above and beyond what the characteristics of a regular woman would receive. And also the work of her hand, and the word here, and I thought this was interesting, this is the word yud. And so there's 2 words for hand. It's either yud or kaf, and this hand is the hand of ownership and authority. So let the work of her hand, let that work of ownership and authority and strength, and this is it's not necessarily just the hand of her service. This is that hand of authority that she has. That's what's being praised. That's what's being recognized. So I thought that was kind of a little different too, because again, women were not praised in the ancient Near East.
Right.
They would not be praised at the gates, and acknowledgement of their authority and assertive and ownership definitely would not be praised. So
Right.
the mark that she has left definitely is important, whether it's the mark on her family, the mark on her husband, or the mark in this community and in society. So curious, what kind of mark do we want to leave? What is
Right.
the sign that we want to leave with our family and with our husband, and taking it again, always taking it a bit further. How do we look at it as the bride of Christ, and as our as our church, and in the
Mhm.
church, what's the mark we want to leave in the world?
Right.
What's the praise that we want to receive in the marketplace, in that active life, in society, as a church, not just individually, but like
Right.
what's the mark that our body of Christ wants to leave when people consider us and look to us. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain. We strive so much to have great appeal and music and a platform and lights and a show. And listen, I enjoy them as much as anybody else, but it's just like the smoke machine that we put out. I mean, it's gone as soon as the service is over. Are we going to walk out and go, wow, I really enjoyed the lights and sound? A lot of people do. Or are we walking out and saying, I'm going to remember this church for the fear of the Lord.
Right.
So, we always have to look at how does it point to Yeshua? How does it relate to Yeshua? So, yeah.
And it's funny because, even the times that the Lord led me from a church, he always reminded me of what he taught me there and why it was important that I was there. So no matter where my husband and I have attended church, we always saw, well, this is what we're taking with us that we'll never forget, that we will always use because we learned it here.
Right.
And honestly, for me at least, I just couldn't stay in a church for all my life, one church, because unless the pastors are in and out and you're learning from new pastors, I just don't feel like that I learn as much if I'm at one church. Like, I think different denominations have different structures of theology, of course, but they also focus on certain things. And so where you may be in a spirit-filled church that really is about the Holy Spirit, sometimes you don't learn as much scripture because it's all Holy Spirit based. But then you go to a good Bible-based church and you learn a lot about the Bible and a lot about theology and that kind of thing, but you don't learn much about the Spirit. So sometimes it's hard to find church that intersect those two in a good and healthy way. So I think it's important I just personally don't think you can learn everything from one church or one denomination. So, but I know there are people out there who are very loyal to their denomination, and it doesn't matter where they go, they find that same denomination and they go to that church. But that's never been me because I felt like I wanted to learn more than what one denomination offered, if that makes sense. So
yeah, and actually I think what you're saying kind of makes sense in relation to the Proverbs 31 woman, because one of the questions I hear often is this her all the time, or is this a lifetime? And I honestly think it's a lifetime, because you're not going to know the mark that you have left until you review your life, and we were talking a little bit before, we enjoy writing, we enjoy teaching, we would love to have a bigger audience. Who wouldn't? But the man who shared the gospel with Billy Graham, who nobody knows his name, right? But look at the impact that he has had. Look at the mark that he left on the world. So does he get credit for one person, or does he get credit for the millions that Billy Graham also got credit for?
Right.
So, it's a lifetime, and it's going to ebb and flow with the changes and seasons within our lives. And I kind of put this in the back of the book. This last verse, give her the product of her hand and let her works be praised in the city gates. I've mentioned this before. Proverbs 31, a lot of Jewish commentaries believe that it is a commentary of the book of Ruth. And if it truly was advice given from Bathsheba to Solomon, then they very well could have known Ruth, because she was David's great grandmother.
Right.
Well, I don't know the lifespans. I don't, I knew my great grandmother. She was alive for a few years when I was very young. So there's a chance they could have known her. They absolutely would have heard the stories of her. And so the book of Ruth closes with Naomi holding the new baby on her lap, and the women of the city are praising her at the city gates. And so it's we're seeing this acting out. And in some Bibles, or in some Jewish Bibles, the way that they order the books are different, and some of them have Proverbs 31 and then the book of Ruth. Or I might have it the other way. It might be the book of Ruth and then Proverbs 31. I think it's Proverbs 31, then Ruth. Just so that you could read that, finish Proverbs 31 and then go right into the book of Ruth, so that you could see a living example of this Proverbs 31, with her life in action. And so, nobody knew the mark that Ruth and Naomi would leave on the world until we got to the end of their life, or late in life, and they were able to look back and say, look at all this that happened. You truly were an Ishet Chayil, a woman of strength, to be praised. And that, that's, of all the things that I have done, yes, I'd love to be honored as a good mom, yes, but more than anything, I want to hear that good and well done, good and faithful servant.
Right.
I also want to hear, you were a really great Ishet Chayil. You were a great woman of strength. That, to me, that would be a great honor.
Absolutely.
So we have officially come to the end of our study, The Strength of a Woman.
I think we're going to have to do this book.
Which one is that? Oh,
Key.
I don't have that one.
Oh, you got to get
another book I have to buy.
I know. But this is interesting because he shows you where Jesus is throughout the Old Testament.
Okay, I got to write that down.
And it's going to be it'd be a great lesson. It'd be a great topic to have on here.
Okay.
And let me just give you a hint. Can I give a hint?
Yeah, please.
If you go to the book of Judges, Marlene, you're our first comment today. So there we go.
Good.
Words do connect. Ruth 3:11 and Proverbs 31:10 both mention the phrase virtuous woman.
Right. And honestly, Marlene, that the virtuous woman, the Isha Chayil, those are the only two times that exact phrase is used in the Bible and contributed to a woman. So, when Boaz says, you are a virtuous woman, Ruth, and then for Proverbs 31 to have this same phrase. So it's the only time a woman is called that in the Bible. So yeah. A lot of Jewish commentaries. Honestly, if I could write another book, I think I would want to write a book on the book of Ruth, and just do a comparison with Proverbs 31 and how it really truly is a great story. Yeah. There is a really great lesson by Rabbi Foreman. He really goes into it, and I couldn't write fast enough to take notes on that. It was just
really,
yeah.
I know and we recommend Rabbi David Foreman.
Yeah.
He is so amazing. He's an Orthodox Jew. He doesn't believe in the Messiah, but he is such a gifted teacher. Yes. And if you have any questions on the Old Testament, he can take you through those things. And he just makes it, a true teacher just makes it easy to understand. It doesn't matter where you are in your studies. He puts videos. Now the site does cost. You get 30 minutes a month for free. Mm-hmm. But I ended up just becoming a member because
it's worth it.
I needed more information.
Yeah.
30 minutes wasn't enough. So here we go. We had some questions here. So yes, so you're right. She's a wise lady. So Ruth is really, really good story. And
did you know too that Ruth is actually related to Tamar as well? They're like 7 generations. There's I think it's 7 or 10. I can't remember, but every 7 generations, there's just some incredible links that we don't even see, because we don't take the time to really dive into that lineage. But there's just incredible. Yep, aleph-beta.org. Good stuff.
So there it is. That's and that is his site.
Yeah.
And again, you can go and just find a video,
Yeah.
the video on Ruth,
Mm-hmm.
and then just watch it. Most of them are anywhere from 10 to
Oh,
12, 13,
yeah.
maybe
12,
18
15 minutes.
minutes.
Yeah.
So it's easy to get one in, if not two.
Mm-hmm.
He does have some series on
Right.
different things where
Right.
he'll talk.
Right.
And then when you join, you get a free book.
Yeah,
So
you do.
that's in one way, get a free book.
That's yep.
But so one of the interesting things in here in the Christ Key is what it's
Mhm.
called by Chad Bird, and it seems kind of blurry, but it's Chad Bird, Bird. And we were talking when I went to go see him in Cleveland. He was talking about the story of Samson, and when the man of God, or the angel of the Lord, because they call him both, the angel of the Lord and the man of God, comes to them and tells them about that they'll have a son, then the father of Samson wants to say, what says, can we know your name? We want to give you honor. And he goes, you cannot know my name. It is too wonderful. Okay.
Mm,
Well, what does Aleph mean? It means wondrous. And
mm.
what is a symbol for Aleph? It's it's God. It's the
It
head,
is.
the leader, the father, the oxen. It's that leader. It's that strong leader. And so here he is, actually, again, a play in words on words,
Mhm,
which is very common in
mhm,
Hebrew.
mhm.
But he's saying, what is your name? And he's telling them, well, go to Isaiah 9. Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Prince of Peace. We have all these. The first name that's given is Wonderful.
Right,
So his name is Wonderful because he is God, and
right,
he is the Aleph. And
right.
so it's very interesting because here he is secretly kind of giving them his name, but he's
Mhm.
not an angel. He's a messenger, and the messenger was the Son of God at
Right.
times.
Well, and
So
think about it too. The messenger is the word. So,
yes,
I mean,
and that's
all
where,
time.
and he even brings up a point, and meaning Chad Bird. He goes, "Why did John say word? Why did in John 1
Yeah.
1, why did he say the word was God, the word was with God, and he was there in
Mhm.
the beginning?" Because he goes, he could have used wisdom, he could have used
Yeah.
wonderful, he could have used all these different names for Jesus,
Yeah.
but he chose the
The
word.
word. That's right.
And then even the word in Samuel, it's used as, it says the word came and stood beside him.
Yeah. That's
So
cool.
how could it be? It's a person. It's
That's
it's
right.
not just the word.
That's right.
Meaning, so
Good
that's why
stuff.
that book is so good.
All right. I'll put it on my order. All right. So next week, Stephanie's going to be on her own. She may or may not have a guest. We've extended an
Yes,
invitation, so it is pending.
I did ask Terry Murphy, and this is
Yeah.
her book. It's on the Tabernacle. It's very, very good.
Right.
It's set up like a devotion, but you can also read it through. You don't have to stop. It's
Right.
like she does have like day 21,
Right.
but it's divided into day 90 days. And we'll talk about this more. She's also going to be on my podcast.
Great.
We're doing that today later.
Great.
But we just have a few minutes. But should we one little thing, our show and the day and time may be changing.
Yeah. I
Lauren's
we
getting a real job.
I am going back to school in the fall. I'm going back to the classroom. I got my position back at the same school with the same principal, and I love 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 working there. So I'm very thankful. So, but I can't be here on Tuesday morning to do a live show. So we will either record, which I really don't want to. I like having the questions and the interaction,
Yes.
or we'll be pushing it off into an afternoon show, which could be 4 or 5 o'clock. We really don't want to do an evening kind of thing, so it may be around 4 o'clock in an afternoon. We just have to look at
Right.
Mark's schedule. And so stay tuned. We'll make that decision this summer, and we'll start probably transitioning during July.
Yes.
I go back early. I go back August 2nd. So I
So
have
we
to,
will let you know.
yeah, we will.
But for the next few weeks, for the next month, we're
Yeah.
here this
Yeah.
Tuesday morning, 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
And for you, those of you who watch us later, watch us recorded, it
Won't make a
doesn't,
difference.
yeah, it doesn't make a difference for you.
That's
So
right. Right. And so probably for this summer, we're either going to just do a short book, or we may take a look at Terry's. I think we may end up doing Terry's book in the fall, because I think it might be a
yeah.
good jumping off.
And we may go through some short books.
Some topics
We
or
could
something
do a
like
couple
that.
of short books.
Yeah. So we'll be here next week. We'll be here through at least July here on Tuesday mornings. And we thank you. We thank you for your questions and your comments. And thank you for joining us through Stephanie's book, Jewels of Hebrew, and sticking with it through Strength of a Woman. And we'll just pivot and start taking on some new material. And we appreciate you guys joining us.
And if you've read any of Lois Tverberg books, like the Rabbi, what is it?
Walking in the feet of Rabbi, sitting at the feet of Rabbi, walking in the dust of feet.
Yeah. So if there's any of those that you would like, please leave us comments about those, because those are also good books too. They're very, very entertaining, very good, very understandable, but very basic place to start. So
That's right. All right. Well, I think we've hit it. I think we've gotten down to our last few minutes. Thank you. And we will see you guys next week. I think, let me make sure I have all our disclaimers and everything up front. We do.
And don't forget to check out Lamb Network. And if you go to lambnetworkradio.com, you can find out more about them and the other programs they have on. So please check them out.
Definitely. And don't forget their prayer time as well. We definitely appreciate you guys joining us here on Lamb Network.
Thank you, Mark.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hugie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.